Hey guys, back to looking at aircraft again this week. This time we're looking at Revell's 1/48 scale P-47N Thunderbolt kit. The P-47N variant is basically can be considered the penultimate version of the P-47. So let's see how Revell did with this kit. Fortunately, it does have this side open style box. So does mean getting into it's a little more challenging. Move this stuff. Okay, so let's start here with the fuselage. So overall, they did a fairly nice job here on the fuselage. All detail is nicely engraved. It's fairly well in scale. Nothing really, jumps out that could be potential issue areas. Now, over on the back side here, one thing they did do for some reason is split the rudder section into to just being on the one half. Why they did this, I don't know. It really doesn't make any sense from a build standpoint to do it unless you were going to have it detached so that it was potentially posable. So yeah, that's a bit of an oddity there. Now, continuing on to our stabs, they're overall nicely done. The split between the actual control section is a little bit big by my eye, but not so overly big that you need to really worry about too much. Moving on to the cowling. They did do a decent job on capturing the overall shape of the cowling. There may be some little inconsistencies that rivet counters might pick up on, but at least to my eye, there's nothing that overtly jumps out as potentially wrong. Now, continuing on to one of the sections of the engine, overall detail is passable. I'm not going to complain too much here. Would say it's one area, if you are going to replace and do a resin engine, it would be to your advantage, but for most people, it's going to be more than sufficient. Continuing on, we have the rest of the engine components. Nothing really to jump out that I need to say that I haven't. We also have a single pilot figure for the kit, which interestingly they split into two halves for the main body and a separate arm. Why they did this, again, is another oddity. Now, one thing I do like that they did is they gave you two halves for weighted tires, which is a nice inclusion, as you don't typically see that that often from kit manufacturers. You usually have to go aftermarket. So to have it on the kit to begin with is a nice inclusion. Continuing on to our main landing gear, they've interestingly chosen to include part of the landing gear bay sidewalls attached to the gear itself. Now, this has an advantage that it does allow us to give the gear a little extra support, as this is going to be a little bit on the heavier side of aircraft kits, but at the same time, it does mean we're going to have to assemble them into when we close up the wings, as that's the only way we're going to be able to really get it on and put into the gear bay correctly. So that is a bit of a disadvantage. The obvious solution to this would be to clip the landing gear before you put it in, but that then creates its own problem since you have no easy way to mount it short of drilling new holes, which would be potentially difficult. So it's a bit of a mixed bag there. Talking about the detail, though, they're all right. Nothing really stands out as erroneous or incorrect. So overall, acceptable. Continuing on to our cockpit sidewalls, they did a pretty decent job right out here as well. Let me rotate this. No, they're nicely detailed, and while I'm sure they don't do everything that you would get with, say, a aftermarket, either photo etch or resin, but they do a decent job out of the gate. So that is definitely a plus. Moving on, we've got our machine gun barrels. Here is another, I would say, definitely aftermarket would be superior. As clean these little guys up, it will be a bit of a pain. Got our landing gear bay doors for the mains, as well as the tail gear bay and our main cockpit area. Now, interestingly, they chose to do the front of the cockpit as the main wall and then a separate back wall part. So that's a little interesting. And once we get into instruction sheets, you'll see how they chose to have you build up the cockpit is a little different and offers some advantages and disadvantages, which you will see that when we get there. Last up, we've got a couple more parts for the gear bay door parts, as well as the sidewalls, our seat, which is all right, nothing to write home about. Does not include seat belts of any kind, and there are do not have any decals for them. So that is something to be aware of. You'll have to add in. We also have part of the supercharger as well on this sprue. Just as an aside, one of the air inlet ramps popped off the sprue. Figured, make note of that. Now, moving on to our next sprue with our prop. I don't know if this is just my eye or if this is, but just some of the angling and shaping of the prop just to me looks ever so slightly off. It's a little too bulbous and a little too thin in certain parts. Obviously, I don't have the actual, specifications for the prop on hand, but just to it looks just like that much off. So that is something to potentially be aware of and to double check again. But to each their own. Continuing on, we've got our set of rockets, drop tanks, bombs, and their accompanying mounting brackets. We have our front panel, which in all honesty seems a little underscale for this kit. And this scale, it almost looks like it's somewhere between 72nd scale and the correct 48th scale. And next to that, we have our rudder pedals, which almost look like they're 32nd scale. Which is, they did an odd thing here. So here I would say you might want to look at going replacement, but yeah, we've got a case of underscaled with the main dash and overscale with the rudder pedals. Thankfully, though, the control stick is in scale. Second to last, is our two wing halves, which does help give you a pretty decent idea in terms of size of this kit based on the wingspan alone. And all detailing is quite nice. Again, some of the gapping between the flaps is a little excessive. More so on this particular sprue. But one thing of note, they did mold on the ailerons onto only one side. And on these flap parts, you are going to have to clean up a copyright thing that fortunately Revell does. But it does tell us that these molds are from 97, even though this is a newer boxing of this kit. Continuing on to our clear parts for last bit of going over this kit. They do a decent job. They're nice, clear, and do provide a proper scaling effect. Included also on here are position lights, our gun sight, and another additional light. Moving on to the decals, we do have two options. Decals of which are nicely done, and again, this is where also I've figured out that this is a newer boxing dating from 2012 based on the copyright of that versus 97 for the molds. But we're given two options for U.S. aircraft, one with a bit of nose art, which is surprisingly well done. This is one area where kit manufacturers can drop the ball a little and cheap out, and you typically have to go aftermarket to get the really nice ones. But this one, surprisingly, is quite nice out of the gate. The other one, for some reason, seems a little faded. I don't know what happened with this decal. If maybe there's an issue with my kit, I don't know. Beyond that, though, all the colors are properly synced. Decals are nice and thin, so they should go down without any issues. Let's go ahead and just put these parts back into the box before we move on to the instruction sheet. Again, this is one of the issues that comes with these side open box is from Revell, as opposed to how just about everybody else does it with the straight open the box and get to your parts. Okay, moving on to assembly. Starting with the cockpit, you do see how it's pretty straightforward build, but what's interesting though, and this partially explains why the cockpit tub is a little oversized, is that you slip the sidewalls into it as opposed to mounting them on the side of the airframe, which is a bit different and does provide some advantages and disadvantages. One of which being that you'll be able to close up the fuselage prior to putting the cockpit in and then slip it in through the opening for the underside of the wings. So as I said, that does give us some advantages and disadvantages in that, obviously would look better to mount the sidewalls flush to the fuselage, but it does make assembly a little more difficult doing it that way. So yeah, it's got its good points and its bad points. Moving on, we build up the landing gear into the underside of the wing, making sure we also cut out all the holes we need for the munitions that we're going to mount. For attaching that on and building up our large Wasp engine, which once we do detail it up will look quite nice. As I said, the only real issue with that is some of the detail could be a little sharper, but again, no. If you're going to go resin replacement, no. You've probably already made that decision. But for the rest of us, no, it's all right. There's some areas you could probably do a little more, but without going too far into the woods of increasing detail, you get a decent enough engine. Moving on, we build up our munitions and all that jazz. Fortunately, they do not include a recommended armament guide like you will see with some of the Hasegawa kits, what options go where and so forth. Lastly, we do finishing details, putting on the canopy and windscreen prop and what have you. Again, two marking options, bit of a stencil hail with this kit. Fortunately, they don't have them grouped all together onto individuals, so you can put them in sections. So you're gonna have to do a lot of small decals going on. So overall, the kit's not bad. It has a couple areas where it could be better, but at the same time, you know, for the price, you really can't beat it. I picked this up for about $25. So it's, you know, for that kind of price point, you can, for most part, make do with any shortcomings the kit has, simply due to the fact that you can get it so cheaply. So yeah, overall, I will recommend it based solely on the price. I mean, given what kits are going for these days, finding something that's, you know, as decent as this kit is in this type of price range is getting to be a lot harder than it used to be. So that was a look at Revell's 1/48 scale P-47N Thunderbolt kit. A good kit, especially for the price. So until next time.